Senhoras e senhores,
Ladies
bem-vindos.
and gentlemen, welcome to session 4 of Project Room of Brazil 2021 Investment Forum. I'm Gabriel Zimmer and will be the moderator for this session. This session will be dedicated to the Secretariat of Partnership Programs, which is available to promote the projects in virtual stand. Send your questions to questions.bif@apexbrazil.com.br. During the presentation, private projects from our sponsor, Petrobras, will be presented. I notify you that our platform enables you to see the projects with simultaneous translation to English. This is the last session from our project room. Good event to you all. To begin the fourth session, we call the Special Secretariat of the Partnership Program for Investment as PPI. We are here to talk about the Partnership Program for Investments from the federal government. This presentation will be available at our virtual stand in Portuguese and English, and you can download it, access it to see in more details and find out about the projects. This program for partnerships and investments was created to facilitate their interaction with government and investors for infrastructure sector and privatizations in the government, to generate jobs, overcome our infrastructure gaps, and reduce the size of Brazilian state in our economy. The program was created in 2016 and has performed with major deliveries and auctions in our country. The structure of the program counts with 7 ministers of state, which are part of the Council of PPI. Minister Paulo Guedes, we have meetings with the participation of President Bolsonaro to decide which assets will come into our priority portfolio. All actives become immediately a priority for the federal government regarding all advancements, licensing, everything regarding the project, so it can be structured and placed in a competition to attract investors to our countries. Apart from the ministers, we have 3 bank presidents, Caixa Econômica, Banco do Brasil, and BNDES, who will decide the priorities to attract private investments, national and foreign. So PPI works as a major hub. We'll have this permanent contact with potential investors who are looking at Brazil and aren't still here, investors who already invest in Brazil, investors who would like to invest in another sector. We will welcome these investors, understand their doubts, their difficulties, their fears regarding the investment fields, so we can bring all information. We know Brasilia has a project in many ministries. We have different fields working in important projects. The regulating agency or the ministry, and PPI will connect all areas so the investor can mention the subject he wants to talk about, and we bring the authorities to the table to clarify any doubts. Apart from this important work with the investors, we work closely to institutions, financiers, embassies, who help us take all embassies worldwide. And we, state and municipal government, so looking within the government, and subnationals, so we can move forward with partnerships with the states and municipalities, with all support from the federal government. And we have important connection with licensors, control institutions like the audits court. publicizing all the material, and we have major interaction with the legislative branch. And I will talk about this interaction with the Congress, so why it's important to move forward with this agenda, attracting investments. This work brings transparencies, makes governance easier. So for the ones who still ask why invest in Brazil, the answers are many. These slides bring some examples of the numbers Brazil represents that answer to this question of why to invest in Brazilian market. First, because of the size, we're the fifth largest land area, and that brings many advantages regarding the consumer market, the potential for growth of this market in many sectors in Brazil. We are the eighth largest destination for FDI because of our size, the amount of projects we have, and opportunities. We are the sixth largest population in the world, and we have the opportunity. We attract investments, which is the ESG agenda, taking care of environment and social pacts regarding all projects with fundamental governance. And we will show you that Brazil has many opportunities for development, infrastructure with sustainability. That's very important. You know that Brazil is one of the main producers and exporters of many commodities. We have seen this demand for Brazilian products growing. We've had increase of movement in our ports, and the pandemic challenges our infrastructure, our potential, and our growing demand for exports places us in this challenge to develop the sectors of transportation, energy, telecommunications, and all these projects. Our interaction with the National Congress and the relevance of this work has to be said because the country is going through major transformation, and this happens not only by effort from the government, but also state governments, and because we now have in our legislative power a major agenda that's changing legal frameworks to attract investments. And with these new frameworks, we will develop more partnership projects to offer the market. The pension reform was a major reform with large impact, which was necessary because we had an assessment in Brazil that we often didn't believe in long-term investment in a country where we knew the pension system was reason for lack of belief. Overcoming this phase in the National Congress was important so Brazil could rescue its tax credibility and attract investment. Come invest in Brazil because we are serious countries that can meet their tax obligations. We have other important reforms that will be discussed in the Congress. Administrative reform in order to reduce the weight of the state in the economy and use public resources to develop education, healthcare policies, public safety. We have tax reform that is a major challenge because of the need to simplify the tax system divided amongst the union, states, and municipalities. So this is being done by the National Congress, and we'll have an important tax reform. Infrastructure reform also. Here we have many texts which are being discussed in many sectors of our infrastructure, and all of them will translate into opening market, more regulatory stability, jobs creation through private investment. Two legal frameworks. Basic sanitation last year has generated important results. We'll talk about private investments and for basic sanitation. And recently we had the approval of the new gas market, an important legislation for transportation of gas. And we know this legislation reducing, cutting red tape, making investors access easier, de-verticalizing the transportation sector for gas will attract investment to Brazil in the sector. And this agenda keeps on happening. We have the cabotage bill. We have modernization of power sector approved in the Federal Senate, and concessions and PPPs to modernize and makes it easier to have concessions, PPPs in Brazil. Exchange foreign market for the ones financing themselves in foreign currency, which was approved in the lower chamber and is being discussed in the Senate. Environmental licensing to simplify, and it's important to highlight Brazil commits more and more to its infrastructure project with the sustainable development agenda. We need to simplify hundreds and thousands of legal frameworks so they can be followed. Now we have so many norms for environment in Brazil that it generates uncertainty for the investors. So what we intend with this project is for this all to become more clear so we can preserve our environment with development, with sustainability. Privatization of Eletrobras, which is already advanced to capitalize the company. Infrastructure debentures to stimulate financing of this infrastructure with incentives. Another important project is the post office privatization. It's being discussed and we will attract private investments for the post office, a company that's in over 5,000 municipalities. And the way to modernize and attract more incentives and enhance services to our users is through this privatization. This oil and gas production sharing to discuss the oil sector in Brazil, and also authorization for railways to allow more investment in Brazil. This will depend on the concessions, allowing us to authorize companies to evolve in this railroad sector.
Congress is discussing to modernize the sector. So this is why we can say with certainty that we are going through a moment of reform. And this modernization of attraction of investments, and it's very important also because of the current moment that Brazil is going through, in which we do not have the natural or the funds to be able to face this need of investment in different segments, and also to face need of growth, because infrastructure cannot be a bottleneck for the Brazilian growth, and also to face all the challenges of the after COVID, the aftermath, in other words, to resume our growth after the sanitary crisis, and to know that we have fought to fight this, the effects of this pandemic in families and income. So the National Congress reform has been very important in order to be able to attract foreign investments. The law to bring certainty to the foreign investors. In this slide, we have the numbers of this project. I mean, of everything that has been accomplished ever since this project has been approved. So we're talking about more than 770 billion reais in investments with projects that have already been carried out. In other words, auctions, railroads. Many of these projects also bring to the federal government billions of reais in grants that also add to our fiscal effort. Many deliveries have been made in the last 2 years. 2020, 2019, 2020 have been very important for our partnership program. In this last 2 years, we have drawn more than 19 billion reais that will be gotten through concessions. And many of these funds will come in the first months of contracts, and they will collaborate for the job creation and also for the economy of growth of the for the growth of the Brazilian economy right after the signature of these contracts. This slide shows the map of 2019. We had 36 auctions carried out. It is important to say that it's not just about an intention of the government. We do not have the intention of drawing investors, foreign investors, and decrease the responsibility of public services and focus on regulation and planning, because this is the essential role that the Brazilian state has to play. We are talking about an agenda that is being carried out. So in 2019 alone, we had 36 auctions carried out. And as you can see, in different cities, we have different leasing of ports with billions of reais being invested. We also have auctions of railroads such as Ferrosul, which has been a promise and now is finally being fulfilled with an auction that took place in 2019. The roads auction with 2 roads in Goiás and Tocantins, airports, so you can see the 12 airports, so you can see the volume of this portfolio that Brazil is bringing to the market. We're talking about 3 different blocks that won over in the Northeast in all of the auctions, but we also have investors from Brazil, from the middle of Brazil, as well as investors from Europe. We had auction in mining, in power generation, in transmission generation, 12 batches, and many auctions in the area of oil and gas and petrol. So these auctions have brought great revenue to Brazil. 2020 was a year that really surprised us. We had a challenge in the health field that has brought a lot of difficulty to our area of projects, but it also motivated us to be more proactive and creative and try to think outside the box and continue in our way in spite of this pandemic that has been challenging all of us. And we've been able to put 29 projects on the road, and we also opened in 2020 a very important role of the PPI, which is to structure projects for states and municipalities. And this is when we started in 2019, and we started to harvest the fruits with the auctions that we carried out in 2020. And we can see that many auctions of PPIs for public lighting that were carried out by the federal government in sponsorship with the BNDES or the Caixa Econômica, supporting the 9 municipalities that have had all of the consulting that was contracted and with the federal government supporting this kind of action. Sometimes you think that these actions are small, but only in the small states alone we had billions of reais that were invested in projects in the 2 first years. But much of the investments that happen in these cities are sustainable investments. We're talking about technologies, for example, for talent management, for the reduction of crimes through these technologies, replace all of the lamps for LED lamps, LED lamps. So this is a very strong project for the federal government. Also in the area of sanitation, this is a reform of the legal framework. This is an important agenda in Alagoas where we've had many participants in this auction, and we have investments of 2.5 billion reais, and also with a grant of 2 billion reais. So the state of Alagoas, in addition to having gotten this first batch, now it's bringing 2 more batches, recognizing the potential of these auctions, and now it's going towards the universalization and having great results. We are also having great results in Espírito Santo with the Cariacica auction and following up with this great agenda of structuring for the sanitation projects. And on the federal government side, we've had many renewals on railroads, which equal something like billions of reais in investments in railroads. So this is a very important agenda that the Ministry of the Structure has embraced as a challenge to develop more railroads around Brazil, considering this continental dimension. So we want to be less and less dependent on roads and depend more on trains. So this is why these contracts have been very successful, that have been signed with many intentions of investments reaching over 25 billion reais only in the renewal on this mesh of Paulista and also Valley. These two with obligations of counterparts, as well as which is the construction of another road for the integration of the Middle East, which will connect the state of Mato Grosso to Goiás. That should be done by Vale, and then we're going to make a concession of this road once it is ready to be operated. We also have the BR-101, BR-101 in Santa Catarina. We had auction of oil and gas. Also in the sector of energy, the batches for transmissions. We've also had an auction for parks. So our goal is to diversify our portfolio, not only in the area of transport and energy, but also seek investment for other bodies, including these investments in parks for visitation. In 2020, our portfolio, we are almost 6 months through, and we had many auctions that have taken place. But 2021 is a year that we are going to have 33 assets. We've already had 33 auctions already, assets auctioned off. We've had the railroad in Bahia. We also had mining that is going to bring, this railroad will serve the mining network in Bahia, bringing ore to Ilhéus. And not only for ore, but also for the agricultural production of Bahia to the ports of Ilhéus. We've had auctions of roads, BR-153, Goiás, Tocantins. This road alone, with billions of reais of investments, 1.52 billion reais, and also we've had airports. So the airport auctions, they were very emblematic because we had questions regarding why is Brazil going to advance on airport auctions when we've had such crisis in health that has been so impactful in the air transportation. But we're talking about long-term investments. In a country with the potential of growth such as Brazil, this is important, and this is why we're steady fast. Because we cannot postergate investments in Brazil, and the focus of these auctions is not just to collect money, but to ensure that private investors with the capacity to carry out investments, they take these assets and they follow by the rules in terms of safety, certainty, and investment rules. So in these auctions, we have a lot of offers. For example, in the north, we've had auctions in Goiânia, and we've also had a batch in the south, in Paraná, Londrina, etc. So finally, as for ports, here in Maranhão, we are going from north to south of Brazil, offering opportunities. In only this auction of 2021, 33 auctions, they are going to get more than $41 billion to Brazil, and we're just beginning. We're just heating up the gears because 2021 has a lot more to offer for all of us. Our current portfolio that I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation is the evidence of assets that will be incorporated that are priority, and this is being coordinated with the ministry. So this portfolio of projects for structuring, this is flow. For every meeting, we bring more assets to the portfolio. In every auction, the assets that is removed, we keep following that project until even though the auction has already been carried out, because our goal is to improve the structure of these contracts from one auction to the next. So this is a continuous process of learning each one of these projects that we offer to the market. Due to the diversity of this portfolio, it is part of our challenge of move forward in investments in Brazil, and we're not only looking at volume. In other words, we want to add assets with high investment value. What we want is to transform this culture of offer of public services only directly by the public service, so we can have foreign investors with good rules and with good alignment that can really focus on the part of, so the government can focus on the part of planning, inspections of regulations, and leave the private sectors act on what they can do best with the rules of quality. And with all the technology that is necessary, we can always improve the services and modernize as time goes by. And so this, what we find, in addition to the 4 relevant projects of transportation and energy, we're also going to find here fishery terminals with a smaller structure, but with great potential for those families of fishermen and fisherwomen in the coastline that depend so much on fishery, and they are not able to commercialize their fishery because of lack of infrastructure to be able to have everything they need to be able to sell their fishery. And this is very bad because it causes losses and even disposal of fish that is not adequate. So we have a portfolio of parks and forests. We are not selling parks. What we are doing is attracting investors to explore these assets with sustainability, help the country to preserve these assets with firefighters and everything that is needed so that the park can develop along with its conservation, and bring more people to get to know these assets that Brazil has and that sometimes are not even open to the public because of lack of infrastructure. The same way, the good handling, management of our forests and preserve investments and employment in the areas that need employment the most legally, so that we can monitor and regulate via the ICMBio as well as the Ministry of the Environment. You can see that we have projects in the area of tourists, so that we want to explore not only the natural assets that we have that sometimes are closed because of lack of management, and draw investors so that these parks can be known and visited, and that way generate more employment to our country. We also have areas, we also have options in the area of telecommunications with options in 5G, not only for the sake of fast internet, but also we want to be able to have satellites so that we can advance on internet of things, agriculture, IoT. In other words, everything will have a huge impact on our country. And on the other side of this slide, we see a lot of policies that we have been acting on. I think that the next slide brings with more details all these foreign investments, private investments in other areas, so that we can have this culture that I have mentioned. So we are going to find here, since the opening of the market of transportation, of roads, transportation, and transportation of passengers. This is an important project that PPI has been working with the Ministry of Agriculture, and we want to focus on road transportation as well. The use of waterways so that we can depend less on the roads. So we want to have sea roads and cabotage, health service to help states so that we can help states prepare for the PPIs in these areas of health. We have a PPI that's very successful. We want to replicate and help other agents to develop this. Partnership in the area of tourism and credit. We also have a small number of daycare center for children, public daycare center for those families that are not able to pay for daycare, but they need a good structure so that they can keep their children while they can work. We also see that this model of PPI can offer better service at lower cost to the low-income families. The projects of sanitation, construction of prisons, a special work that we have carried out with the Ministry of Justice, not only for the sake of working with infrastructure in terms of vacancies in prisons, but also to change this ideology of just putting people in jail. We want to be able that the prisoner has the opportunity to work in jail. This is a very interesting thing, and we have the support of multilateral organisms that show that these investment programs has a good mission, not only of attracting great investments and generating jobs, but also to attract small investments because they may be small in terms of investment, but they are gigantic for our country. This slide shows a little bit of what we have experienced in terms of impact of COVID in the projects of infrastructure. Some people have asked, how is it to infrastructure? So many projects in Brazil has such a huge portfolio to offer in the world in terms of attraction of foreign investment and infrastructure. So how has it been to work with this in spite of the crisis? Of course, we have been impacted. We've had to review some of the projects and go back to the board and check to the planning, timing of investments that have had to be redrafted. But we have been able to deal with the impact on a sector basis. For example, airports that have been very much impacted because passengers stopped flying. However, the ports grew during the pandemic due to agribusiness as well as super harvest and also exportation and currency devaluation in terms of Brazilian real. So we don't need to review in terms of demands for the port in a negative fashion, but we need to review some of the airport projects. This is a great learning for us, but the difficulty that Brazil has of moving forward also gave us the strength not to stop. So we now have a cycle of investments that have been revised for all these projects to take place. But we have modernized some forms of move forward with the projects. For example, every new project will have to go through public consultation in which we make available, in addition to the online environment, all the infrastructure necessary to be able to have the population talking to us and appreciating projects and learning more and bringing their contributions. This already happened. In the most difficult moments of the pandemic, we've had to stop with live talks and only have online talks. But this has been done with great responsibility, sometimes even giving away computers and laptops and iPads. We've also had great impact in the conversation with indigenous population in terms of the needs of advancing in protecting these populations. We've had some delays, but only those delays that were really extremely necessary so that we couldn't postergate these investments. An important point that has to be mentioned is that Brazil has played a very important role in terms of the dialogue with the current investors that are here, in terms of prospection of the cash flow that we have in Brazil, to avoid that public services be interrupted or paralyzed because of cash flow. And in this sense, we've moved with a rebalance of financial accounts with the postergation of payments of taxes, etc. In other words, we've had a strong dialogue with many different sectors, understanding that the sector has been affected and understanding the dimension of these impacts. And this positive and constructive dialogue also is the reason why we see this continuity in the agenda of concessions of the federal government, because investors know that we have legal certainty and also protection of investors in case of force majeure or for anything that in our risk matrix is not the responsibility of the investors. We are going to have all the seriousness to be able to rebalance these contracts. In the next slides, I'm going to show what we are structuring so that we can see the dimension of everything, the dimension of this portfolio and the diversity. So here we have a map of what is structured in terms of airports. And you've seen that in 2019 and 2021, we've already had 2 auctions in batches that were made. So that means 12 airports in 2019 and 22 airports in 2021. And now we're going to continue with these auctions that we're going to have in 2022.
Rio Grande do Norte should be concluded this year. Natal, a new concession after friendly reinstatement from the actual beholder. The other are 3 blocks to happen in 2022. We have Block North 2. We've had Manaus. Now we go to Block North 2 with important airports as Belém, Macapá, and other airports, Santarém, Altamira. In a block we call, we have larger airports and smaller regional airports, but that are important for the development of aviation in the region. We mix that to assure investments in all sizes, larger and smaller. We have Rio de Janeiro Minas block, where we have important airports as Uberlândia, Uberaba, Montes Claros, Santos Dumont, and Jacarepaguá are jewels of the crown in Brazil, with large flows. The infrastructure restrain the ability of these assets. There are central airports like Congonhas, which is a block from São Paulo, Mato Grosso do Sul, where we have assets in Campo Grande, Campinas. Campinas is outside this block. Another procurement, which should happen next year. We have the 7th round of airport concessions for 2021, Natal, Campinas for next year. And we have our first PPP for regional airports. We know of many small airports potential. Maybe they should become large airports because of the potential. We are structuring this first PPP in the North region, and the auction should be in 2022. We talk about more than 5 billion reais of investments in airports, added to everything that was done before. Passing to the railroads, our challenge is of 81 billion reais investments in railroads that go throughout the whole country. We have new concessions like the West Grid. We are structuring a new concession. Renewals as the South Grid, structured with the government of Mato Grosso do Sul and Paraná. We have FIOL 2 and 3. Because of FIOL 1, we will keep on with this important railway till where it stops in Bahia, until we connect it to the north-south, and then connecting north-south to FICO. So there's going to be another important connection, connecting Brazil from west to east, apart from the other region, and see the challenge of the Ferrogrão, a greenfield railway that will connect grain production to the Miritituba port in Pará. So this production can be drained with less costs and reducing freight and all negative impacts of the highways, impact with accidents, environment. We know the railroads replace that positively. We have an important railroad with the auction already scheduled, but we need to add these modals, highway and railroad, to have a effective means to drain the production. The investments for implementation are 8.4 billion. Then we need another 13 billion for a railroad that's going to cost 21 billion. And when we consider all values for maintenance, we reach values of more than 63 billion reais, a project of more than 80 billion reais. And important to highlight it is there is no overlapping to indigenous lands and conservation units. So we were careful to schedule the map of the railroad not to have impacts on the environment. We have many kilometers to structure, more than 17,000 to be we have to balance investments, capex, with the ability for the users to pay tariffs, and structuring will try to mitigate risks, risks for demand, for exchange, establish an adequate risk matrix to attract investment to the sector. We have an auction scheduled, which is following the railroad of Rio Branco, more than 1,000 kilometers of railway in a shorter concession, 10 years, auction in July. These two projects in blue, assessed by the accounts court, connecting the states of Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo, and also BR 381 in Minas Gerais, connecting important cities like Belo Horizonte, Governador Valadares, and Viana and Espírito Santo. Next slide shows our auctions foreseen for 2021, adding up to 24 billion and 300 kilometers. Port sector, many auctions were done, and the slide shows what's been structured. So we did a lot, and we are cheered with the port privatizations. Ministry of Infrastructure has moved forward, but also has some news, which is the full concession of port, privatization of Docas Company. We will start this model with Codesa, Docas Espírito Santo, involving privatization and concession of services in the port of Vitória, Espírito Santo. In the same model of privatization and concession, we move forward with the Port of Santos. We'll have a concession in São Sebastião, São Paulo. We're structuring Itajaí concession, Santa Catarina, moving forward with the assessments of privatization of Codeba in Bahia, that operates terminals and ports in Aratu and Ilhéus, Salvador, in the state of Bahia. And recently, we included other port concessions to be studied. So we have this mix of rentals, and we will have more auctions in July going on. And the auctions for privatization and concessions will happen along the year. Next slide highlights the set of these privatization of full ports, not only terminals, parts of the port, but the port as a whole. As I mentioned, Vitória, our pilot, first one to be auctioned this year. Assessments are ready. We will send them to the Federal Accounts Court. And Port of Santos, because of its relevance, with huge potential for growth with the right investments. And not long ago, had losses, and with the new government from President Bolsonaro and Minister Tarcísio has positive results. And complete the privatization of ports here in Brazil. The fishing terminals, although they're small, they have huge impact on the fishermen's communities. And this was done with the Secretariat of Fishing. And our first auction was done in Cabedelo, Paraíba. We have these other terminals, 7 terminals being structured. The projects are on public consultation. Santos, Cananéia, and North. All these projects are available for you who want to contribute and understand the assessments, contracts, rules. The public consultation is open, and you can make comments if you're interested. Let's talk about energy. Brazil has a giant mining potential. We spent many years without offering areas that were in our portfolios of our mining agency or CPRM, an old geological service, and areas that have large value that can be assessed with positive results to generate income and employment legally in areas that can be exploited in Brazil. So in this slide, we have some projects that are being structured as phosphate in Mirim, kaolinite, gypsum in Pará, limestone, many projects in the northern region, but also projects like diamonds in Santo Inácio, Bahia, copper, Bom Jardim, Goiás, and the national agency projects. There are thousands of areas which were paralyzed. So up to 2019, you didn't hear about auctions for mining. So we regained this schedule, and with availability for areas of mining, we've already done 2 rounds to privatize areas, and now we are moving forward with the 3rd round that had the call published in March 31 of this year. Many auctions in oil and gas. We regained the auctions in Petrobras. 2 blocks who didn't have any offers in 2019 are being restructured, reassessed. Sepia and Atapu blocks, and the investments are 204 billion reais of opportunities. The auction should happen in the 2nd semester this year. And in October, we'll have concessions of oil and gas in important basins, 92 blocks, offshore blocks, which will be made available by the Oil Agency and the Ministry of Mining and Energy. In this slide, we see the opportunities for energy, new energy, existing energy, and energy transmission. This agenda of generation and transmission is a green agenda. We have a sustainable matrix for energy generation, going more and more to results that are more sustainable, with major wind, solar energy, placing Brazil ahead amongst the countries with best results with green energies, without fossil fuels, without the impacts, and a strong renewable energy matrix. In June, we'll have existing energy -4, -5, and 25th of June, we'll have new energy generation, A -3, A -4, and we close the energy month, which is June, on the 30th with the auction for energy transmission, more than 1.3 million reais investments. June will be an important month for the auctions of transmission and generation of energy. And we keep on with the second auction for the last of the year, end of the year, September, an important agenda with a lot of foreseeability. Year after year, Brazil has moved forward with competitive auctions in these generation and transmission of energy auctions. Eletrobras capitalization, privatization, it's worth to highlight because of the size. Nowadays, Eletrobras is a holding of many companies and still responsible for more than 40%, 43% of the transmission lines in Brazil, practically 30% of our capacity to generate energy. So it's a giant that hasn't done the necessary investments because of limitations it has as a state company. So we need to generate income and jobs. So government will still detain participation, but won't be the controller. That's why we can mention privatization and have a competitive Eletrobras to be able to participate in generation and transmission auctions in Brazil. Now you will have an overview of all companies we are privatizing. I mentioned opportunities for private investments in concessions, in transport, energy. Now we will talk about sales of companies and privatizations to attract more private investment, to modernize the companies, reduce, cutting red tape. This is our schedule and the companies that are being structured. Some people say it doesn't go on fast, but it began late. The concessions agenda has gained volume and quality, and it is being reborn. It was paralyzed for many years. We didn't have privatizations for many years. Now we regain with the inclusions in the National Program for Privatization since 2019, and we want to move this agenda forward. So we moved forward with Semtex in semiconductors. The assessment is that the company demanded many resources from the federal government and had little revenue in a sector that the government doesn't need to be present. So the process was approved by the federal government. We have the assets being evaluated already, and we are moving forward with the post office project foreseen for this year. So we should have the public call, and the first phase of assessments is foreseeing the selling of the company's control. We are studying if it's going to be a participation or not. It depends on the legal framework on behalf of National Congress, but we will have responsibility in this process to assure the services should be provided in all regions of Brazil. Our country is very diverse, and there are many public policies behind the post office, important services that are rendered to the population that have to be maintained with the privatization. That's why it's a project that has to be led very carefully because of the impact, the need of employees and places the post office is in. We have SEASA projects in Minas. We expect the auction still this year. Vitória Port, urban mobility in Rio Grande do Sul, CBTU, many Brazilian cities, CBTU Minas. The auction should happen this year, not only for privatization, but with the concession of the services of Belo Horizonte Underground. We can amplify this underground line 2. We have companies from the Ministry of Economics, export insurance that are being studied for sale, and considering the possibilities of keeping on the public policies. Telebras, Communications, Luclep, ABC, and the ports I've mentioned, Santos in Bahia, Serpro and Dataprev, in data sector for the pension system and the federal revenue system. It's clear that the federal government has a commitment with this agenda. We've never had such an intense agenda for privatization happening simultaneously and prioritarily being considered. So we see the 5G auction, Anatel and the Ministry of Communications with the most revolutionary auction. And apart from the revolution and parameter change, we want to take internet to the whole of Brazil. So the project foresees this universalization up to 2029. All municipalities must be serviced by 5G technologies, and many investments foreseen here are over 30 billion reais with long-term contracts, 20 years, and this process is being studied by the Federal Accounts Court, so the auction is done still this year. The national parks shows the diverse performance to attract investment, tourism, parks, but the most important is to understand this attracts preservation. For each of the parks that's being studied, we're talking about some investments of specific fields. According to the management plan, allowing the development of restaurants, but considering the preservation agenda.
fato a visitação, que muitos deles não são conhecidos nem pelos
Many of them are not known by Brazilians or foreigners because of access difficulties.
Difficulty in finding tourist activities in these areas, but also ensure that the investors feel the urge to protect and preserve these parks. So this is a win-win situation, the attraction of foreign investors to these parks, but also forests, such as we have in the south of Brazil, in Canelas, and also we have many other parks. And this slide is more advanced in terms of the auction in Aparado da Serra, in Serra Geral. And now we have the tender of Canelas already published. This will take place in the 12th of July. And also we have another auction in Rio Grande do Sul, and this tender will be published. So, and many other projects that are under operation, and they have very advanced studies already. So this is an emblematic project given the high number of foreigners that have come to Brazil to know this park, and now they're going to have a new means of protection. In the sector of forest, we need to highlight that Brazil has the biggest tropical forest and the second largest forest area on the planet. And we believe that with foreign investments, they're going to be able to protect these shrines. Unfortunately, today we still have illegal activities happening in Brazil, and that's because of the difficulty in protecting and monitoring such a large territory. With these new system, we can have investors that are going to be able to explore the forest, but by generating jobs and being able to protect and conserve these forests. And from these management plans, we are able to have technology and investment to preserve all of the forest area that must be untouched. So a high level of these forests will be only for protection, as is already in these agreements. That the consequence is less deforestation, more preservation, less burning, more monitoring, and more fight against illegal activities in Brazil. These are the projects that are in our portfolio, such as the Moeda Capitânio. The Humaitá project is the most advanced one. It's already in the Court of Accounts, but we are making some adjustments in this material so that we can publish the tender along with the Ministry of Agriculture, the Brazilian Forest Service, as soon as possible. Now we're moving forward to the historical and cultural assets. There are many assets, but I'm not going to talk about each one of them. But it is important to add these assets in the PPI. They are smaller in terms of investment when compared to the other projects that I've already shown, but they're huge when we see the potential of Brazil with historical assets that sometimes are closed to the public because they lack the necessary capacity to welcome people and to be visited. And we believe that with these activities, with these auctions, we can recover these historical centers that are sometimes even degraded, and we can create jobs and income with the exploration of restaurants, hotel services, and other activities in these so many regions of Brazil. This is just a pilot plan, a pilot project. So now I'm going to talk about diversification of projects in our portfolio. We've seen parks, forests, telecommunication. We are now going to the area of regional development. Let's talk a little bit about water and irrigation system. San Francisco is a dream of many Brazilians who live in the Brazilian Northeast and who do not have access to water, that depend on this water to bring agriculture, to bring to feed their animals. And we know that this is a promise that has been around for many years. The many constructions of San Francisco received a lot of money, some like 12 billion reais that have been invested to bring water to many different access channels in different states. And these projects will demand, after concluded, it's almost 100% concluded, it will demand a lot of investment in its operations. So we are going to need to keep 447 kilometers of channels, pumping stations, 14 aqueducts, in other words, aqueducts, in other words, a lot of investments, and we really hope that this has to be done either by the federal government, but we want foreign investors to take care of this project. So this is why we are working with the BNDES and the Ministry of Regional Development, and we estimate an investment of something like 500 million reais so that we can keep this asset up, and we really hope to do it through the attraction of foreign investment, private investment. In this area of irrigation, still, in the area related with water, this is another emblematic project, which is the project of irrigation of Bahia, which is the Irecê Basin. We're talking about many cities in San Francisco, and we are in the quest for foreign investors to continue with the investments that have already been made in the area of irrigation. So it's a concession of real right of use in an area of 51 hectares that we are working along with Codevas, and we really hope that this project is put on the road so that we can start this project. And if it works, we're going to have many other projects of irrigation that will come all over Brazil with partnership with the private initiative. Especially, we are talking about at least 1.6 billion reais of investment. Now, let's talk a little bit about the support that we have received given to the national, subnational, such as the state and municipalities. Many of the services that Brazilian needs are not responsibility of the federal government, such as like street lighting, that is a responsibility of the municipality, water, transportation, and sometimes infrastructure such as daycare centers, hospitals, health units that are the responsibility of the state or municipalities, such as the case of this slide that we're showing to you now in terms of infrastructure. So even though it's not a responsibility of the government, this has an impact on the population, and the government has a capacity to structure these projects, not because we have banks to do that, such as the BNDES and the Caixa Econômica, but also the Bank of the Northeast and many other fermentation banks, but also because we have the PPI, which is a great hub of investment attraction that deals on a daily basis with this issue of privatization. So we want to extend this arm of structuring also to the state and municipalities, and many have come to us. This is why in this slide we have a lot of projects. We have 17 projects in the area of public lighting, also in the area of sanitation. We also have in urban draining that are very important for us to understand how to send investors to an area that do not collect tariff. And we are diving into new challenges and landing on these projects. When it comes to the universalization of sanitation in Brazil, this is a very sad data when we notice that for almost 100 million Brazilians do not have access to sewage. On the other hand, this is a great opportunity now that we have a new legal framework that allows for this sector foreign investments in the sector. So the federal government is supporting the states and municipalities in the sense of structuring these concessions and privatization in the sector of sanitation. So what are the main areas, the main projects in the area of sanitation? We have projects that are in the BNDES and other projects with the Caixa Econômica. Only the BNDES, we have already carried out three major auctions in the last 2 years. So we've had in 2020 the auctions of Alagoas and Caracica, and now in 21 we've had the SEDAI in Rio de Janeiro. It's emblematic because Rio de Janeiro, it's such an important region, such an important state with a great appeal for tourism and a great need of collection of trash and treatment of sewage that has impacted the Bahia, the Guanabara Bay, and the Gandu River, and so many other aspects of public health because of lack of sanitation. And the project of Rio de Janeiro, the auction of SEDAI that was carried out now, recently, in the month of April, was emblematic because of the amount that participated, also the amount of municipalities involved, also the population that will be serviced. We're talking about 13 million people that will be serviced by this project, and also by the amount of investments that we are going to be drawn. That are going to be drawn there. We're talking about over 27 billion reais along the years of concession of these blocks that were offered to the market in Rio de Janeiro. And this project of structuring with the BNDES supporting the state is still going on. So we have a project of Amapá that we believe that is possible to be auctioned this year, which will not universalize water and sewage in a state that has very little numbers in terms of access to water and treatment. Also in Acre, we're starting with a project for the universalization, considering all the municipalities of the state. We have a plain concession of water and sewage in Porto Alegre, Rio Grande do Sul, with the structuring. The blocks of Alagoas that we call the B and C blocks, that are blocks that haven't been auctioned yet, but they are continuation after a great auction of the first block in Alagoas. In addition, we have a block of PPI sewage in Rio Grande do Sul, PPP, and also a PPP of sewage in Ceará. We're moving forward for the modeling in Minas Gerais, and we are in preparation for other states that are in agreement with the BNDES, such as Bahia, Paraíba, Rondônia. In other words, since the approval of this legal framework, adequate conditions so that we can turn this page of lack of sanitation in Brazil, and we are going to be able to do that through the attraction of foreign investment, with private investment, with a very good and designed contract, so that we can have investments with a very good risk matrix, drawing these municipalities of Brazil in this direction. In addition to the BNDES, we also have the Caixa Econômica Federal that works with a fund of filtration of projects, in which the federal government brings funds, and these funds are used to contract special consulting and provide support to the municipalities in these projects of sewage, drainage, and other kinds of projects. So maybe this is the portfolio. We have many municipalities such as Teresina, Piauí. These projects are great. We also have projects that involve concession, and we have chosen to support projects with the municipalities, and with that we gain scale and we gain more people interested in these projects that become more relevant to the population, and we're able to structure projects so that we can impact more people positively. So we have the consortium Combate in Minas. This is a project that the auction will take place now in June. And we have another project of in the state of Ceará called Comai, which is a project that is being structured. And you see the number of projects in Volta Redonda, Rio de Janeiro, with concession of sewage, which is very important. This is a pilot project that brings water and sewage and residue in a single contract. So, and waste, I mean. So we're trying different models of attraction of investments, and we believe that we're going to overcome this great deficit that we have in Brazil, especially in the area of sanitation and in the area of trash. We need to fight these dumps, and we need to lessen the impact of on the environment. These projects will have more than 1 billion reais of investments, and we also have projects in the BNDES with more than 50 billion reais of projects in structuring with the support of the federal government. And I finished this presentation. These projects are for the year 2020 and the year 2021 and the year 2022. We've already done a lot in the year 2021, but we haven't finished. We have 87 assets that are in structuring, and we want to offer them to the market this year, auction this year. The tender has already been published, and these are the ones that are in yellow. BR 163, a tender for power generation. The projects of mining for June, in November of this year. The project of that will take place in June, and all of these projects that are available on the port. Port leasing, roads, and the auction of Ferrogrão, the airport of São Gonçalo that I mentioned in Rio Grande do Norte, the projects of generation of power, mining, projects of oil and gas, fishing terminals, construction of management of parks and forests, companies such as CBTU Minas, the port of Vitória, Espírito Santo, And these many projects of structuring and support to the subnationals, such as the projects of waste management in Teresina, Piauí, and São Paulo. I've just mentioned also a project that we will put together in the same project, residue and water and sewage. We have projects in Rio Grande do Sul. We also have projects in São Paulo, Campinas, and also in Paraná. And I finish now. This is my last slide. We see that we have many projects in the area of engineering, public consultation, analysis, control, publication of tenders, and procurement, road shows. These are many projects that we're already working on, and there will be auctions next year, the year 2022. 25 airports will be auctioned. So this is a great agenda of private investments of airports in Brazil. We have 12 opportunities in ports, 9 opportunities on roads, 3 important railroads with the renewal of new contracts. We also have companies that are being privatized, such as Dataprev, Telebrás, 4 parks and forests, 23 subnational projects, for example, such as that of daycare centers in Teresina, also in the state of Alagoas, prisons in the south of Brazil, in Blumenau, and also in Erechim, Rio Grande do Sul. Also sanitation, solid residue or waste, public lighting, tourism. I mean, this agenda goes on and on. We have much more for the years 2023, 2024, because Brazil is a country with great opportunity to offer in all of the sectors. So I am sure this publication will be available, this presentation will be available to you, not only in Portuguese, but also in English. And we are here to full disposal to meet you and to welcome you anytime, so we can provide you with more information. Thank you very much for your attention.
E representando a SPPI para
And representing SPPI to answer the questions from the audience, we invite Mr. Bruno Estin, Special Secretary, Deputy Secretary of PPI, after the video from the sponsor of the video, after the video of the sponsor, Petrobras. So, transparency.
Para onde vai a Petrobras?
A descoberta do pré-sal foi um marco para todos nós. Nós temos que concentrar investimentos nos ativos de classe mundial, em águas profundas, onde temos os melhores resultados. Para isso, nós precisamos vender algumas de nossas operações no Brasil e no exterior.
E o que vai acontecer com os negócios que forem vendidos?
Nenhuma unidade que a Petrobras está vendendo vai ser fechada. Esses ativos serão continuados pelas empresas que os comprarem.
Quem vai tomar conta desses negócios?
Nós definimos critérios para selecionar quais seriam as empresas que teriam condição de estar adquirindo aqueles nossos ativos.
O que nós construímos juntos vai continuar transformando o Brasil. Petrobras, energia para transformar.
Boa tarde a todos. É um prazer estar aqui nesse evento tão
Good
importante.
afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here in such an important event for the investments in Brazil. And especially, I would like to thank the participation of the investors, those who are with us online, and also thank them for the questions that have been sent. I'm going to read some of them that have come from the audience. Unfortunately, we are not going to be able to answer them all, but we've selected some of them that may be of your interest, of the interest of more people. Well, the first question that came to me, I will read very quickly, is the PPI portfolio is very diversified. The Secretary has presented the chronogram of the project, including Correios and Eletrobras. What are the next steps and expectation of conclusion of these 2 privatizations? Well, reinforcing our acknowledgement in regards to the question, in fact, this PPI portfolio has gone through a great diversification in the last 2 years, and this has become a very good decision in the sense of fomenting the culture of concessions and PPIs, or PPPs. So we want to ensure that contracts of public service provisions are done through the private initiative. As for the Eletrobras and Correios, two high priority projects for the federal government as well as for Brazil for the transformation of our economy, we have an expectation of finishing them around the end of the year 2021 or beginning of the year 2022. The liquidation of the operation will take place in the first 3 months of the year 2022. But these projects are important to understand the step by step. In other words, how the structuring of these two projects takes place. As for the Correios, there was a sectorial study as well as a study from the postal sector that allowed the federal government to know a little bit more about the sector and know how the processes were carried out for the privatization in the world as well as the opening of the sector in the world, and from there take a decision that is well based on the inclusion of the Correios in the national project of privatization.
So, in the meeting before the last of Correios, we had movement allowing the consultants, hired consultant advisor could go into the field and make a stronger diligence in the numbers of the company. We had a strong diagnosis, and now the process demands deepening of the financing analysis in the Correios. So the process now goes through an assessment and structuring period. The CPPI resolution already provided some directives based on the diagnosis done in the post office sector, and this is what we will have as a challenge further on to conclude up to the end of the year. Parallelly to these assessments done by the Development Bank, we had a bill of law sent to the National Congress, which is being discussed by our parliament, and this bill of law is the legal framework for the post office sector to provide more legal safety to the sector. A sector where you have some exclusive services provided by the state company and another part generating distortions with competition of private companies. We are structuring and finding out more details on the Correios and discussing this legal framework at the National Congress to outline this privatization. So after finding more details about the companies, we will take decisions based on what is decided by the National Congress. Regarding Eletrobras, we have a different movement in the privatization because the electric sector is a sector with a lot of competition in our market. We have many companies in generation, transmission. Eletrobras was included in our national program for privatization in the last century, so it's going through a long process of privatization. The executive branch and its newest movement was a law to include Petrobras in the national program for privatization. And as the National Development Bank is an arm of the executive branch, the best advisors could be hired and begin the capitalization process for Eletrobras. So this phase in which we are hiring advisors through the National Development Bank, and that demands time because choosing the best advisors to have the best process, the best product, and best information to make our decisions takes time. And so a correct decision from the federal government was to send the bill of law so this could be initiated and we could structure this capitalization. Once again, capitalization will demand assessments, deep knowledge, diligencies in the company, and at the same time, we will observe the Congress in its analysis regarding this privatization. So some directives being discussed in Parliament and the ones observed in the assessments. It's clear that any movement in the execution of the privatization must wait for the Congress to analyze it, so we have a positive expectation. And this process until the end of 2022. And I hope to have answered the question, and thank you once again. I will read the second question. The pandemic of COVID-19 affected the infrastructure sector severely all around the world, especially airports and tourism. How did this affect the projects in PPI portfolio? Yes, the pandemic of COVID-19 affected structure and differently over the sectors. Some were negatively and directly affected, and some ended up performing well in the pandemic, as in the case of ports and even the post office sector, where we saw demand grow with more mail. This situation reinforces the need for the executive branch to have some freedom, flexibility to provide an answer or response to the contracts, flexible contracts, so we can proactively and timely, effectively provide the answers or the responses to different situations in the 2030 term contracts we established with the private initiatives. And we need to know the contracts deeply, know the infrastructure sector and its demands, so we can do the right thing. Brazil responded very well in the sense that we first had a movement, the federal government had a general response procedure to the economy and tackling the crisis. And in a second moment, we treated different sectors differently, looking at the details in each one. And this was, in my view, essential to reinforce investors' trust in Brazil, to reinforce the trust investors have that Brazil is open, that Brazil knows how to dialogue, that the federal government can dialogue with investors and understand the needs with all care possible. I mentioned this because the history of effective response or good response affects investors' perception regarding the project that we are still structuring in the PPI portfolio. This is essential to reinforce trust and attract more investors to our pipeline projects. Another issue, more practical issue, I'd say, regarding the effects of the pandemic in our projects, in the regards to structuring itself. We had some restrictions to make assessments in structuring projects, and we also had to review some estimates given the transformation that the sector had or not, with impact in demand, foreseeability, and that widened the term of some projects. in our portfolio, but PPI didn't stop. On the other hand, we more than ever worked to include more projects. We used the projects that could be done remotely with all safety and protocol to attract more projects, believing we are on the right path. We took the right decision the way we render public service and use the resilient structure, including with the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, I think we have time for a last question. I will read. It's interesting, it's different questions. It was a comprehensive presentation by the secretary, so let's try to include this diversity. How the project structuring funds work associated to the PPI, like FIEP Caixa. How must the municipality proceed to receive support from PPI to structure and provide public services? These project structuring funds that have the support and are associated to PPI were done to foment restructuring of projects, of PPPs and concessions. In Brazil, we have different institutions. We have direct hiring. We have interests promoted by the government. We have private sector with its initiatives, but we had diagnosed 3-4 years ago in which it was necessary to have more robust technical support from federal government through some instruments like these project structuring funds to foment and increase the projects in the subnational entities portfolio. We had a diagnosis regarding mortality of projects that had initiatives in PMIs, and why these projects didn't move forward. So there was some uncertainty from the local managers, project managing, and what we saw is that we had to structure projects to be able to bring this safety, more quality to these projects, and that these projects could serve as reference for structuring by private initiatives and subnational entities with similar projects, with standardized contracts, similar technologies, similar revenue models, and similar mapping. It was an instrument that had success, is bringing results after structuring the projects and showing we had the right decision to foment and make project replication possible, and how the municipalities can receive the PPI support or support from the funds. The funds were designed mainly to make public calls and key sectors decided by the sectoral ministry together with PPI, in which the sectors will foment the PPP culture differently. We provide projects in sanitations, public lighting, and foment the culture in the sectors so the projects can move forward by themselves. So the way is to do this is to participate in public calls done by the funds, and the municipalities can also look for the sectoral ministry and PPIs with some innovation they would like to see contemplated that were not part of public calls. Because when you have innovation, we have the prerogative to have pilots. And we make a pilot with the municipality that has interest, and from that project, the projects can be replicated in a broader call. I hope to have answered the questions properly. PPI is a hub, as Secretary Marta well explained, for interaction amongst all agents participating infrastructure foment and PPPs, and we have our doors open to welcome investors, public society, civil society for ideas that should enhance business environment in Brazil. Thank you very much.
Phil is passionate about Brazil. Every time he visits on business trips, he makes sure to appreciate the natural beauty of the country, the hospitality and warmth of the local people, and the incredible services that Brazilian cities have to offer. Phil loves Brazil for many reasons, but being a specialist in global funding, he's most interested in the abundance of secure and profitable investment and business opportunities in the country. During his trips to the country, Phil found out that Brazil is truly remarkable. The country has the 12th largest economy in the world and is the 6th largest destination for global foreign direct investment. Brazil is rich in well-developed agricultural, retail, and service sectors. Do you know how he discovered all of this? With Apex Brazil, the Brazilian Trade and Investment Promotion Agency. Apex Brazil's free consultancy program found unique investment opportunities for Phil, and with the PPI, the Partnership Investment Program, Phil's investments are thriving. The PPI works with private investors from all over the world, promoting measures of privatization and facilitating partnership contracts. Phil is just one of the investors from the nearly 70 foreign companies that are currently taking part in successful Brazilian projects seeking to develop infrastructure and help the country's growth, such as private sector concessions for roads, ports, and major national airports, railways that are crucial to the production and transport of grain and ore, the implementation of 5G broadband in the country, concessions for Brazil's stunning national parks, and for research areas in precious metal mining. And there's more. A countrywide sanitation program, construction projects in nursery, hospital, and prison developments are expected to take place soon. Here at Apex Brazil, we guide investors from all over the world, whether they are participating solely or in conjunction with Brazilian companies, and help them assess the many investment possibilities that Brazil has to offer. If you would like to know more, get in touch with Apex Brazil, follow in Phil's footsteps, and seize the profitable opportunities that the PPI has to offer. Learn why investing in Brazil is the right choice for you.
Muito obrigado a SPP.
Thank you very much to SPPI and Mr. Bruno Westing. We see how important the Secretariat is to promote the Brazilian projects portfolio and for investment attraction. Thank you very much to everyone who participated in the fourth session of the projects room of BIF 21. I invite you all to visit the state stands and visit our sponsors, and I wish you all excellent meetings.